when you're studying biology, often as you talk about various living functions like digestion, what you'll often do is for each body system talk about what's called representative organisms. And when we go through our systems, we're going to be looking at earthworms and grasshoppers as representative organisms. And what that means is basically we're just using that as one example of looking specifically at one type of organism, okay, in this case an annelid, a worm, or an arthropod, like an insect, a grasshopper, and sort of studying in a little more detail how digestion and how nutrition works in those specific animals or organisms. So that we're going to be focusing on earthworms and grasshoppers as we move forward throughout our next several units. So if we think about the earthworm, so if you remember back to taxonomy in terms of obviously domain, what? Which domain are grasshoppers in?
Insect one.
That's not a domain. Eukarya. So all eukaryotes. What kingdom are earthworms? They're animals. They are animals. Within animals, then, now we get down to phylum.
Insects.
And the phylum for earthworms, there's three phyla of worms in general. Flatworms, roundworms, segmented worms. Which one do you think earthworms are? Segmented. You can see in their body they have divided up into those sections. The segmented worms are probably the most evolutionarily complex of the worms, and they're called annelids. Okay, so this is phylum Annelida. It includes also things like leeches are in the same phylum. So anyway, when we look at these worms, worms have a tube within a tube sort of digestive system. And, hello? Are we coming in, or are we just like?
If you want to.
You want to learn about earthworms?
Yeah.
So when we think about earthworms, as most of the, what's that?
It's like
All of that, yeah. They have extracellular digestion. So earthworms, what do they eat?
Food.
Dirt. Well, I don't know. They eat.
well, I know
What exactly are they getting out? So they do consume like soil, but what are they actually getting for their nutrients, for their energy source? Well, what's in the soil that they're actually going to be able to consume?
soil when they turn
What in the soil though?
Dead things.
What would we get? Organic matter. So what is soil? It's basically little bits of broken up leaves and roots and plants, and that stuff still has energy in it. Okay? It's often more difficult to digest, but that's what they're ingesting. They ingest soil, okay? And then they have this one-way digestive tract where they ingest soil in through the mouth, and then it moves through a tube into their digestive system, and eventually out. So that digestive tract is called the gastrointestinal tract. And food sort of moves through this, okay? Has two body openings. So unlike the hydra, which we talked about, there's two body openings. So in the hydra, there's only one opening. Food molecules go into that mouth, and then any undigested waste comes out of that same body opening. But as animals become more complex, they have a two-opening digestive system. Okay, and along the way, there's various organs which help in the digestion process. So if we start there in the mouth basically is to ingest soils. Earthworms travel and dig and burrow through the soil. They ingest the soil. And then there's sort of the pharynx, called something you might think of as sort of the throat, which creates the sucking action to actually ingest the soil. Then it moves through the digestive tract. Okay, it goes through the esophagus.
old news.
Yeah, you guys already did this?
Yeah.
All right, next year. So the esophagus carries that food through. Then goes into another organ called the crop. Okay? So if we look at this diagram of the earthworm, we have the mouth, okay. We have then the esophagus, which leads into this crop. The crop is sort of like a storage area. And the grasshopper also is going to have this crop where this food goes, it's stored, and then it's gradually released into the gizzard. The gizzard is the organ that sort of mechanically grinds up this food that's in the soil. And, you know, birds have a gizzard, grasshoppers a gizzard. Do you know what some birds do?
Swallow stones.
Yeah, they swallow stones, which get stored in that gizzard. And as the muscles of the gizzard sort of churn around the food, the little stones help to mechanically break it up, because they don't have teeth to chew things. Other types of animals have inside of that gizzard sort of these plates that help do the grinding. But this is to break down that material. From the gizzard, it then passes into a long intestine. Okay? And as the food moves along that intestine, what kind of things happen to it? What do you think? The purpose of the intestine, Antonio?
It
Gets chemically digested. Also,
absorbed into the body.
yeah, it gets absorbed. Nutrients that have been broken down get absorbed into the blood of the earthworm to be distributed throughout the body. So this is where chemical digestion and nutrient absorption happen. So inside of this intestine here of the earthworm, there's another term that was in your workbook. It's called the typhlosoul. And if you see this tube, this is the intestine. It's not just sort of a hollow tube. It actually has this foldings inside of here called the typhlosoul. And what is the purpose of that? What do you think of how that would be helpful, Sophia?
To increase surface area.
Yes, it is very important. Yeah, so surface area is very important. As we look at these different animals, to maximize the surface area present in an organ that is responsible for absorbing something is important. The lungs have a huge surface area because of the alveoli. Our intestine have a huge surface area because of these villi. In the earthworm, this typhlosoul helps increase the surface area so that more nutrients can be absorbed into the blood. Okay. As they burrow through the soil, earthworms are very helpful for the soil ecosystem. As they burrow, they help aerate the soil, bring air into the ground to help keep the soil aerated with enough oxygen, because lots of different things need oxygen through that soil. As they digest and release their waste products are called earthworm castings. Okay, you see these little clumps of, it's not actually soil, it's basically earthworm waste. So you see that sort of on the soil. If you have a garden or something, you might find those little earthworm castings. You can buy them, like by the pound, to put in your garden to help fertilize it, because they're rich in nutrients. And so you can even buy earthworms. If you have a garden, you could buy a bag of earthworms that come in the mail, and then you dump them in your garden to help fertilize the soil, to help aerate the soil, and they're very good. So this digestive system, though, as we see in annelids, is going to be very similar to all the other animals. As we talk about grasshoppers, and even as we talk about humans, basically they all work the same way. We have a tube within a tube, and as food passes along through this long tube, various organs help to mechanically, chemically digest it, and eventually absorb the nutrients out of it, and then waste is eliminated. But it's basically the same sort of idea. Now some of the organs are different, and they're set up a little bit differently, but the idea is the same.
Oh yeah, Mr. Ross, why do worms have that like band?
I think it's a band to sort of secrete mucus to help them
Most of us
move through the soil easier.
a second glance, but not unsure. Earthworms are her passion. You see, Emma is curator of worms at a Natural History Museum in London. Not only that, she's president of the Earthworm Society of Britain. As Emma is about to reveal, there's far more to the humble earthworm than first meets the eye.
Most people think we've only got one species of earthworm in the UK, but that's really not true. We actually have about 27 different species. We've got stumpy green ones, and they're bright green, stripy ones. These ones, when they stretch out, you'll really see the stripes on them. We call them tiger worms because of the stripes. We've got pink ones, we've got grey ones, we've got ones with black heads, we've got deep red ones, some are really large, sort of 30 centimetres in length, right down to some adults being just a few centimetres, so massive diversity.
Surprisingly, scientists like Emma know very little about the distribution of these different earthworm species. Sampling the worms in your garden can help fill in these gaps.
The best way to sample earthworms really is just to dig a hole in the ground. So I generally dig around the plot, pull out the square I've dug, and then just go through it and try and see how many earthworms are in here. And in a plot this size, potentially it could be 50, 100, maybe even if it was a really, really rich patch, maybe even up to 200 earthworms. So, in an area the size of a football field, you could get maybe as many as 2 million earthworms. All gardeners know that earthworms are really, really good for the soil. But the reason that is because they are burrowing down into the soil, they're letting air in, letting carbon dioxide out. Earthworms are the recyclers of the planet. They are breaking down all the organic rubbish and releasing all those nutrients back into the soil to be used again by the plants. Without earthworms in our soils, life will pretty quickly dry up.
Earthworms aren't just good for the soil. Their juicy, muscular bodies are perfect food for lots of other wildlife. Birds just can't resist them.
Oh my god.
Badgers gorge on them. 60% of their diet is made up of worms. And moles, well, they can eat 50 grams of worms a day. It does seem they get rather picked on by other animals.
One neat little trick I'm going to share with you is something to actually get the deep burrowing earthworms to the surface without the heavy digging. And that's this. What I've done here is mix mustard powder with water. It's maybe around 2 tablespoons per litre-and-a-half bottle, and then pour it on the ground. What this technique does is it just irritates the worms slightly so they come up to the surface.
Earthworm behavior is also fascinating, not least the way they reproduce. I'll let Emma explain.
Earthworms are hermaphrodites, so that means they have male and female parts, but they still sexually reproduce. So they find another earthworm, kind of glue themselves together, pass each other's sperm, and then when they've broken off, they then each produce a cocoon, which then sits in the soil until the conditions are right, and then the babies emerge. I love earthworms because they're so amazingly important for our soils. They're such fascinating animals, and when you actually start to look at them, it's amazing the diversity and variety of them, the sizes, the colours, the different jobs that they all do, and yet no one's out there looking at them. And they're working so hard under our feet. I hope you see them in a different light now.
If you're going to be into something, you might as well be enthusiastic about it. You know? Rather than just sit there and say, oh, earthworms are very important for the soil. What was I going to say? I want to say one more thing about earthworms.
Wait, so they're male and female?
They're hermaphroditic, so some species have both male and female reproductive organs in a single individual. But even in that case, sometimes you'll think, well, then they must self-fertilize. But often they don't, because that sort of defeats the purpose of sexual reproduction. Self-fertilization just means then there's no combining of different combinations of genes, really. So instead, even organisms like earthworms that are hermaphroditic, they still mate with another earthworm, but they both exchange sperm with each other. So the egg cells of one earthworm are fertilized by sperm cells of the other, and vice versa. So there's still the combining of those, and they each produce offspring. They each produce young after that fertilization. Shoot, I had one more thing I wanted to say about earthworms, but I forgot. Maybe I'll think about it later. Okay, let's look at the grasshopper.
They're not seeing the quiz.
Okay, as well. So grasshoppers also have extracellular digestion. And now, sometimes this might be confusing. As an earthworm consumes food, as a grasshopper consumes food, as a human consumes food. Why are we saying it's extracellular digestion? It's inside of them, right? Right, but it's not inside the cells. Technically, your digestive tract is not really in your body. It's not within your cells, right? It goes through your body, but it's not actually inside of your cells. This food, as you ingest and digest food, it's never really inside of your cells. It's just in this hollow tube that runs through our body. Same is true of worms and grasshoppers as well. So they also have extracellular digestion. They also have a one-way gastrointestinal tract that holds a large amount of food. The food travels from the mouth end to the anus end, along the way being digested and broken down and so forth. So very similar. So two body openings, the mouth for ingestion, the anus for egestion. And what we call sometimes this gastrointestinal tract, sometimes it's called the alimentary canal, is another term you might hear for the digestive tract. Okay? So sort of overview of the grasshopper without the wings and legs and stuff, so you can see some of the internal organs. But grasshopper has a mouth. Many grasshoppers are herbivores. They eat little bits of leaves and stuff like that. So they ingest that through the mouth. Okay, they have specialized mouth parts for sort of cutting through leaves and so forth. And they also do have salivary glands. Okay, you can see them. They're shown down here, salivary glands, which release saliva. And we know saliva has digestive enzymes, okay, that start digestion, chemical digestion. From there, food moves into the crop, storage area. After the grasshopper ingests food, it's sort of stored in the crop, and then it's released into the gizzard a little bit at a time. The gizzard, okay, has special plates in it, chitinous plates. Chitin is a type of material that's produced, a hard material, forms like the exoskeleton of insects. Well, they have these chitinous plates inside of the gizzard to help grind the food up that they eat. Okay, so food goes from the mouth into the crop to the gizzard for grinding, then moves into these areas, which is where chemical digestion begins. Okay, there's stomach, and eventually it moves into the intestine. There's glands along the way. Again, this should be familiar, that chemically digest the food. There are capillaries that absorb nutrients from that food. As the digested food makes its way through the digestive tract, eventually it gets to the rectum, which is the equivalent to the large intestine in human, where water is reabsorbed. And then the remaining undigested material is eliminated, egested through the anus, the opening at the end of the insect.
Why is it called a reabsorb?
So reabsorb water? I don't know.
Or they would absorb it before that?
Not really, but I mean, I think as part of the secretion of enzymes and so forth. There's water is a part of those, so they put water into the food for chemical digestion and reabsorb as much as possible at the end. All right, we'll talk about, we're going to save humans digestion for tomorrow. So we'll stop our notes there.
Why is Han Solo?
Because I show a picture of each type of animal. We had a picture of an earthworm, picture of a grasshopper, picture of a human. Are you guys going to comment about Han Solo now? First job of the Hutt?
He's not a human.
Now Han Solo. Yeah.
Yeah, but if they're in a galaxy far, far away.
I've had this debate with Mr. Arcuri actually.
So
Are they humans or
No.
not?
No way.
So that's wrong.
What?
Better update that picture.
Are they humans? Is Han Solo human?
No.
It matters. He's not from Earth.